Hello, Monarchs. Welcome to the second video for lesson 1.7. If you have not watched the first video, please go back and do that because we filled out the top here. We talked about cube roots, we talked about perfect squares, and we talked about square roots. We also did examples 1A and B and started example C, but now we're going to finish example C, okay? So, as I said before, we are finding the cube root of 125. We're finding the cube root of 125, okay? So if you put this in your calculator, you would have to find the number that you multiply by itself 3 times to get 125, and we would get that our answer for that is actually 5, okay? 125 is a perfect cube. If I did 5 times 5, that's 25, times 5 is 125. So I had to multiply 5 by itself 3 times to get to 125, okay? All right, so D, we have the square root of 4. So if I was to put this in my calculator, if I just think about it, or I could find it on my chart up here. See, I have 4. What number's above it? It's 2 times 2. So the square root would be 2, okay? Now it wants me to find the 4th root of 81. So it wants me to find the 4th root of 81. Remember, any number, whatever number is by our square root sign is the root that it wants us to find, okay? So now it wants us to find the 4th root of 81. So we have to think about what number do you have to multiply by itself 4 times to get to 81. Okay, if I was to put it in my calculator or if I just think about it, I would know that it is going to be 3. Okay, the 4th root of 81 is indeed 3. Okay. Now for F, I have the square root of 4 over 9. What that means is we're basically taking the square root of 4 over the square root of 9, which is actually 2 over 3, okay? All right, so as we were saying, when you take the square root of a fraction, you take the square root of the number on top and the square root of the number on bottom. So the square root of 4/9 would actually be 2/3, as you can see here, okay? Let's move on to example 2, all right? So example 2 says find each root, round your answer to the nearest 100th place. Okay, so this one we're gonna have to use a calculator, all right? So if you have your Desmos calculator, please go ahead and pull that out, or if you have the calculator app on your phone, that's another option, okay? So it wants us to find the square root of 10. So if we put that on our calculator, so we have the square root of 10. If we put that on our calculator, so I'm gonna do 10, I'm gonna take the square root of 10, okay? And I get 3.16227766601, a really long decimal, right? But here, as you can see, it tells us to round to 2 decimal places. That's it. We're only rounding to 2 decimal places, okay? So the square root of 10, if we rounded to 2 decimal places, would just be 3.16. Okay, the square root of 10 is 3.16. All right, now it wants us to find the square root of 89. You can put this in Desmos. You can use your calculator app on your phone if you would like. Just find the square root button. Okay, so if I did the square root of 89, so the square root of 89, and it wants us to round to 2 decimal places. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root of 89 and see what I get. I get 9.4339. Okay, so since that third number is a 3, we're just going to keep it as 9.43. Okay, so the final answer for this problem would be 9.43. If you put that on the test, you would get that correct. All right, now it wants us to find the cube root. So the cube root of 80. Okay, so it wants us to find the cube root of 80. So you need to find your cube root button on your calculator or on Desmos and figure out, you might have to play with it a little bit, but I'm going to put in 80. I'm going to take the cube root of 80, and I get 4.308. So since that third digit is bigger than 5, I will have to round that 0 up to a 1. So the cube root of 80 will actually equal 4.31. Okay? That is the cube root of 80. And all I did was put that in my calculator. It was just a simple plug and chug. Okay? So let's look at example 3 quickly because it's the last example on these notes, and then we can move on to the homework video, okay? So it says example 3, is the number 100 a perfect square? Why or why not? Explain using sentences. So basically all we have to think about is there 2 numbers you can multiply by it, or is there 1 number you can multiply by itself to get to 100? And the simple answer is yes, right? If we multiplied 10 by itself, 10 times 10, we're gonna get to 100, okay? So now using complete sentences, I'm gonna ask this or answer this question, okay? So I'm going to say the number 100 is a perfect square. Okay, the number 100 is a perfect square because you can multiply 10 by itself to get 100. In other words, you can take the square root of it and get a whole number. Okay, if we took the square root of 100, we get the whole number of 10. Okay, so stay tuned for the homework help video.